It's down California and Gavin Newsom, a new law that's got parents, educators, and frankly anyone with a pulse scratching their head. It's called AB 495, or the Family Prudence Act of 2025, and yes, it has officially been signed into law. Now, the official pitch is that it's meant to protect immigrant families from separations due to deportations or detainments. On paper, you think it sounds reasonable. You want to make sure kids are cared for if something unexpected happens. That's what any responsible law should technically do.
The bill making its way through the state legislature is proving to be controversial. It's called Family Preparedness Act of 2025, or Assembly Bill 495. The bill's author says it's designed to protect immigrant families from separations in the event of deportations or detainments. It expands who can be considered a child's guardian, such as someone who is not a family relative, but some critics believe the language is too broad and it could put all children, regardless of immigration status, at risk. ABC 10 News reporter Laura Acevedo spoke to local parents and school leaders about their concerns.
Well, this bill still has a long way to go before it's passed into law, but parents are hoping to stop it in its tracks, saying it puts their students at risk of getting picked up by anyone who is not their parent or legal guardian.
Empower mixed status and
California Assembly member Celeste Rodriguez introduced AB 495 back in February.
AB 495 takes a comprehensive approach to encourage family safety plans, strengthens legal tools to prepare in case of family separation, and establishes protections of immigration information at child care facilities.
But it's getting attention now after it recently passed the state assembly.
Well, this bill to me is a slap in the face to parents.
As currently proposed, the bill would help families if children were to be separated from their parents due to immigration enforcement, expanding who could legally care for a child to include a, quote, non-relative extended family member.
Allowing parents facing any long-term separations to designate a joint guardian while preserving their parental rights upon their return.
But critics argue it's just too broad and could lead to anyone going into a school and picking up a child, saying the bill doesn't make it clear it's intended to protect undocumented immigrant families. Tuesday, Lakeside Union School Board member Andrew Hayes voiced his opposition for the bill.
It's a very concerning thing for parents because parents want to know when they send their kid to school that they're safe, that they're in our care.
No on AB 495.
Outside San Diego Unified, about a dozen community members also rallied against the proposed legislation.
There's just a lot of room for abuse, and I said there's so many. The loophole is a loop chasm. It's too big, too wide. They need to tighten it up.
I did reach out to the bill's author about the community's concerns, but so far haven't heard back. This bill would still have to pass the state Senate and be signed by the governor before it becomes law.
Well, here's where things start to get complicated. The law expands who could be considered a legal guardian for a child. Not just parents, not just relatives, but anyone who can fill out a form. Now that's where the broad language comes in. And I'll admit, it sounds absolutely bizarre. And how can it actually mean any adult could step into a claim guardianship if the parents aren't physically present? That's a big deal. Parents across California have been speaking out, and it's understandably why. You send your child to school, you expect them to be safe. You expect the adults in charge to be accountable, and the rules are to protect your family. However, under this new law that Gavin's signed, the concern is that someone could exploit these new provisions. Hypothetically, a stranger could claim guardianship of a child if they're temporarily separated from their parents. The wording doesn't specifically limit into undocumented families, which means the protections and the risks apply to every child.
At the very least, 1 million kids in our state have at least one undocumented parent, and over 100,000 children in our schools are undocumented themselves. Just last month, a mother of 3 was detained by ICE at her own immigration court hearing. Instead of receiving an update on her case, she was handcuffed and deported to Mexico. Her oldest daughter was left to care for her 2 younger siblings. In that case, a relative stepped in, but too many families are not that fortunate. Often, when a parent is taken without warning, children are left completely alone, vulnerable, and unprotected. That's why we must act swiftly and empower mixed status and undocumented households to prepare for the unthinkable that unfortunately has become all too real for many in our communities. AB 495 takes a comprehensive approach to encourage family safety plans, strengthens legal tools to prepare in case of family separation, and establishes protections of immigration information at child care facilities. Because we know the possible separation weighs heavily on many families in California, this bill updates the caregiver authorization affidavit to ensure it is more widely accepted for school enrollment and medical care, and allows it to be used by non-relative extended family members such as close family, friends, or godparents. We find that so often children of immigrants are left to enter the welfare system. The Family Preparedness Plan Act creates a new joint guardianship process, allowing parents facing any long-term separations to designate a joint guardian while preserving their parental rights upon their return. To help ensure that no child experiences trauma and a placement for care and safety, AB 495 requires the Attorney General's Office to publish model policies and guidelines limiting cooperation with immigration enforcement at child care facilities by April 1st, 2026, and having them adopt the policies shortly thereafter. It requires local education agencies to adopt the latest Attorney General's model policies published in February of this year and encourages up-to-date emergency contact records.
Now I sat and read a few comments from school board members and local parents, and one line stuck with me. Someone said, "The loophole is a loopchasm, it's too big, too wide." And yeah, that line doesn't exaggerate the situation. You can see why people are almost alarmed. The concern isn't theoretical, it's practical. Schools have procedures, security measures, check-ins, all designed to prevent exactly what this law could unintentionally open the door to. And then you hear the reactions. Some are suggesting extreme measures like moving their families out of the state. One father described the scenario of waiting in the couple pickup line just a couple of minutes late and imagining someone else swooping in and claiming legal guardianship. It's chilling to think about, honestly. And yet, here we are, this is the law. Newsom has actually signed it, it's active. It's actually active right now. What makes this particularly striking is how it fits into a broader set of laws Newsom has been pushing. And don't forget, he wants to run for president in 2028.
Governor Gavin Newsom signed a package of bills aimed at easing California's high energy costs. The state has some of the nation's highest electricity prices and is facing the closure of 2 major oil refineries. The legislation includes a measure to boost oil production in Kern County, create a regional energy grid with neighboring states, and replenish an $18 billion wildfire fund to help stabilize electricity rates. Governor Newsom also extended the state's Cap and Invest program through 2045, limiting emissions while funding climate and housing projects. In a statement, Governor Newsom says, quote, "I just signed into law the biggest electricity bill refunds in a decade. Millions of Californians will soon start saving billions on their energy costs, and the savings don't stop there. We're stabilizing the state's gasoline supply to avert severe price spikes at the pump, and we're making it easier to build the abundant clean energy we need to keep bills lower." On top of all that, we're doubling down on our best tool to combat Trump's assaults on clean air, Cap and Invest, by making polluters pay for projects that support our most impacted communities. End of quote from the governor. Now, following the bill signing, Republican Assembly Minority Leader James Gallagher shaped his thoughts on the legislation on social media, saying, translation, "I, Gavin C. Newsom, am slightly reversing course on my own policies because they suck and would have driven gas and electricity prices even higher." Gallagher also said in his post, quote, "Nonetheless, I am not lowering any of those costs. Good luck to you, California. I'm busy running for president." End of quote. You can read more about the bills and reactions on KCRA.com. Again, reactions for both Gallagher and Governor Newsom.
Legislation limiting ICE officers' ability to operate freely in public spaces, barring them from wearing masks, requiring ID displays, restricting access to student information, and protecting patients in hospitals from certain federal inquiries. Taken together, it's a very, very clear statement. California is drawing a hard line against federal enforcement actions. But the kicker is these bills are passing because of supermajorities in the state legislature. There's very little opposition left that can actually stop these measures before they become law. And yes, some federal officials have pushed back, saying this doesn't impact their operations, but here's the reality. Parents and local communities still see the implications every single day. They're not worried about theoretical federal enforcement. They're actually worried about what could happen at their child's school tomorrow. That's tangible. That's immediate. I keep coming back to this point, a law that allows any adult to potentially claim guardianship over a child. It sounds absolutely bizarre even saying that. Even if the intent is protective, the execution feels dangerously vague.
Or at local education agencies, this information will educate families who will benefit from family safety plans. Speaking in support alongside me today are Kristen Power with the Alliance for Children's Rights and Alexandra Estrella with Shirla.
Great, thank you very much. You'll have 2 minutes to present on the bill, and whoever would like to start.
Good afternoon, Kristen Power with the Alliance for Children's Rights. We appreciate the Assembly members' passion on this issue, and I want to speak just quickly to say, as co-sponsor of the bill, we're obviously in great support. The guardianship program at the Alliance for Children's Rights helps eliminate barriers and provides free legal services to caregivers seeking legal probate guardianships. Every day we see how family separation disrupts children's lives, causing emotional trauma, instability, and barriers to education, healthcare, and long-term well-being. Without greater clarity and enforceability, many parents are forced to make impossible choices. Some make the difficult choice to suspend their parental rights through the complicated probate guardianship process. Others opt to use a caregiver's authorization affidavit for a more informal arrangement. The caregiver's authorization affidavit is an existing legal tool used by a caregiver who is not the parent or legal guardian of the child in their homes to consent to school enrollment and some medical care. They do not transfer custody of the child to the caregiver, which only a court order can do. Notably, using a caregiver authorization affidavit necessarily means that children are coming into contact with mandated reporters, like school and medical personnel, who are required to report suspected abuse or neglect.
And the fact that Newsom actually went ahead and signed it without narrowing the language, without guardrails, signals a very particular kind of governance. It's aggressive, unliteral, and pushing boundaries on what the state can decide over parental authority. And yes, some might argue, well, it's only for emergency circumstances. It's about family separation, but laws don't exist in isolation. The way this is written opens the door for misuse, and that's not just theoretical fear. That's a real policy flaw. And what happens actually next? Well, legal changes are likely. Experts have already said that this law might actually get axed, and it's possible it will go to courts, maybe even the Supreme Court, and that's where it becomes a test, because not just for family protections, but for just the balance between state power and parental rights. So here's what I'm left thinking. Do we wait for a bad situation to unfold, or do we act now to push for clarifications, amendments, or even a repeal? Can you imagine the precedent this sets if nothing changes? That's the questions that parents, educators, and lawmakers now have to grapple with.
Governor Gavin Newsom, he has aggressively defied President Trump in the face of increased federal raids here in California. The governor today signed a whole series of groundbreaking laws that push back against what he called the president's secret police tactics here in this state.
Governor Newsom said that the laws will make it harder for federal immigration enforcement officers to target children in schools and patients in hospitals. Another one bars on-duty federal officers from wearing masks. KTLA's Rachel Menitoff takes a deeper look at the new measures.
AB 49, just signed the law.
Governor Gavin Newsom signing off on 5 bills intended to counter the Trump administration's crackdown on undocumented immigrants living and working in Los Angeles.
There's a word that you've never heard uttered from the President of the United States' lips, certainly not Stephen Miller, and that's pluralism. We practice pluralism. It's a deep point of pride. Those values are under assault.
Several are aimed at protecting public schools, making sure that staff notify students and parents when there's ICE activity on campus. Another one prohibits federal officers from entering a school without a judicial warrant and prohibits schools from giving out students' personal information.
All of this legislative resistance is to protect Angelenos from our own federal government.
One new law requires federal agents who may not be wearing an official uniform display some kind of badge or ID. Most of these go into effect immediately.
SB 627, the anti-masking law. Thank you.
Hard to ignore the political angle here. Newsom's ambition is these moves solidify his image as bold, assertive leader with the party. But with ambition aside, when you're dealing with laws that touch children and parental authority, the stakes are absolutely, completely different. They're higher, they're personal, and the broader implications for governance, checks and imbalances and citizens' trust are absolutely enormous. So where does that leave us? California now has a law that's broad, confrontational, and potentially dangerous. Parents and communities are rightfully concerned. Legal battles may follow, and I'll be honest, when I read through the details, I was very surprised, not just by the law itself, but by how quickly it moved and how broad its scope is. If you're a parent in California, you have to ask yourself, is my child fully protected under this law? Is it possible for someone to exploit it? And what steps do I need to take to make sure my family is safe?
Officers from wearing masks while on duty. This one will be enacted in January.
California Democrats started drafting these laws as soon as President Trump took office in January, and then accelerated their efforts as his administration backed aggressive ICE operations. But they're certainly getting plenty of pushback.
In a press statement sent out earlier in the week, a representative with the Department of Homeland Security says, quote, sanctuary politicians are trying to outlaw officers wearing masks to protect themselves from being doxxed and targeted by known and suspected terrorist sympathizers. Acting U.S. Attorney Bill Asaley added, I've directed our federal agencies that the law signed today has no effect on our operations.
But we face a dark moment in our nation.
On the local level, the Save America movement announcing Saturday it is launching mobile Liberty vans, staffed with trained professionals to document and film ICE raids moving forward.
Because America's promise of opportunity, dignity, and justice must not be surrendered to fear and hate.
Let me ask you this question. What would you do if you're in California right now? Would you push for legal challenges, demand stricter safeguards, or start planning contingencies for your own family? How do we balance protecting immigrant families while also assuring every single child is safe? These are the questions that won't go away, and the answers, well, they aren't simple, but one thing is clear. AB 495 is now a law, and Gavin signed it, and the debate around it is just the beginning. It's a lot to digest, and honestly, I'm still processing some of it myself because it's absolutely bizarre. But I want to hear your thoughts. How do you see this playing out? And more importantly, what would you do if you were in the shoes of a parent living inside California right now with this harsh new reality?